Thank you, Dr. Tim. Appreciate it. And I believe you have a celebration of your birthday coming up Monday, right?
Yeah, I think it's on Monday. I don't look at the calendar much these days, but yes.
You're going to be with us, though?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be working.
All right. All righty. Well,
all right.
So
have a wonderful show. You too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So welcome, everybody, to the second hour of MindShifters Radio. And today is Friday, July the 28th, 2023. And our call-in number is 563-999-3581 and press 1. And that puts you in the queue to talk to us. We'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. We'll give Michael a moment to dial in and invite everybody to put the tools to work in your life, use the app. We've had conversations the last couple of days with several people who are actively using the app now. And Michael worked with a young man this morning, and I think he made some tremendous breakthroughs. And so keep the tools. I mean, it's handy. It's right in your phone, and put it to work in your life. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart. And welcome, everybody. Glad that you're here and ready to move forward to the next level of this conversation. And yes, I did do a private session with someone this morning. It's actually the first time in, 25 years I've done a private session. And the fact that we now have the internet available to do this, I wasn't so sure how, especially StillPoint Breathing was going to work, and we tried it out in intensives back over the last couple of years, and then in the MindShifters and StillPoint Breathing Club. And so I've decided that that's something I'm going to start to do more of. So if you're interested in a private MindShifters StillPoint Breathing or worksheet session, that's always been in Jeanie's ballpark, but just decided to go ahead and do that. Again, I found it quite enjoyable to just have that one-on-one time again. It's been a long while since I've done that. So anyway, beyond that, have we got anybody in the phone queue with a hand up, sweetie, or anything happening in the chat room?
No, it is all quiet.
Well, then, I want to talk a little bit, seeing as how I just came fresh off of a breath session with someone, a little bit about the power of using the StillPoint process as a tool for uncovering what, has perhaps you've been hiding from yourself forever. And in the ancient teachings, you'll recall we've spoken this often, that they said the veil of the temple must be rent in twain, torn in two. And that's always been presented, at least through churchianity, as, well, they were talking about a purple curtain in the church. But actually, that's not what they were talking about. The temple is your body-mind unit, and the veil is the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious mind. You've heard me say it before. My thesis is that it's totally and completely unnatural for a human being to have an unconscious mind. We're not designed to have an unconscious. It's something we artificially create when we live in denial. Now, to make more sense of that, you've got to understand that there are 3 levels of function from this thing we call carbon-based memory. People call it the mind. It's really not a mind at all. It's just more like a computer function than it is an actual mind. The mind is a thing that can choose and change directions with the energies that are moving in it. Carbon-based memory, just whatever resonates is what it's going to present. It doesn't matter how much you hate it, resist it, how often you want to say, I want to do something different. If you don't change what's resonating in carbon-based memory, the next time it comes up with enough impetus, especially if there's an unconscious component to it, it's just going to take over. So when we talk about this carbon-based memory system, we're talking about the fact that every cell in the structure stores information. So literally we are energetic beings, and every what appears to the eye to be a cell is like a miniature hard drive. And every energy, every frequency that comes to it is stored holographically in every cell in our structure, including, by the way, the sperm and the egg. So were you to conceive a child tomorrow, that child would have in its structure every thought you've ever thought, every feeling you've ever felt, every reality you've ever engaged in. Now, they honor this in the ancient Aramaic when they said, the sins of the fathers are passed to 3 and 4 generations. That wasn't a punishment thought. I can remember being a kid and hearing that and going, oh, God's going to punish me for what my father did? That's not fair. No, that's not what it's saying. They're just telling you about how physiology works, how this energy system works. When they said, look to the lives of the fathers, for ours are but a shadow of theirs upon the earth, that wasn't some kind of mystery. They were just saying these energetic dynamics, behavior dynamics, are passed from generation to generation. How many times have you known someone or heard of someone who, for instance, the neighbors were talking about the kid down the block, and the day after the child was conceived, the father was killed. And now the child is 6 years of age, and they look at him and they go, he walks just like his father. Yeah, exactly. He talks just like his father. He's never known his father, never been exposed. How does that happen? It's all energy. So all of that information is stored in every cell in the structure, and my offering is that we're designed to be able to recall or pull up any energy that's stored within our structure. We're not designed to have things hidden from us. But when we go into denial, whenever I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, I'm now in denial. And when I go into that state of denial, in order for my mind to generate a construct, a reality that shows me that you're the problem in my life, that you're the cause of my pain, in order to do that, I have to hide the true cause of my pain. That's how we create an unconscious. Now, there are those who will talk about the conscious and subconscious as though that's what there is to the mind. But they miss a vitally important third component. So when we talk about this function of the body-mind unit, we're really talking about nothing other than just the firing of information in the structure. We could use a radio as an analogy. Let's say that I turn my radio on, I turn the volume up, and I'm listening to a particular piece of music. So now, if I were to be able to go inside that radio and tap into all the energies moving through it, there are 500 different radio stations broadcasting that are sending signals into that radio. The tuner is attuned to just one, and so the other 5,000, 500,000, today with all the stations there are, the other stations are there, they're just not being listened to. The amplitude of those stations not being tuned into is not running the circuitry. Let's say I've got it tuned to 900 on my AM dial. 900 is running the circuitry, but the rest of the stations are in there at the same time. So that would be like conscious, the sound coming out of the set is from 900, and subconscious. There are 100 or 1,000 other radio stations potentially there, but we're not attuned to them. So conscious is what you're aware of at any moment. My offering is we should be able to be aware of anything in us at any moment, anytime we choose to. But unfortunately, because we tend to live in denial, and we've been trained through denial, and there have been generations and generations in all of our bloodlines that have lived in denial, there's a third component. And that would be comparable to, so we've got conscious, subconscious. I'm listening to 900, but there are 100 other radio stations available. If I turn the radio off, the tuner is tuned to 900. It's still bringing that signal in, but the radio's turned off. I can't hear 900. I can't hear any of those stations. So that would be like the unconscious. It's just not accessible. And it's all got to do with the amplitude of the signal coming through the radio set. Well, if I say to you, what color is your car? Don't think about the color of your car. I provided a frequency with my voice that matches something you have brain cells for, and those brain cells fire. So your mind goes to, something about the color of your car. I'll have a person, I've had people in the past say, well, I'm not thinking about it. Oh, really? What is it you're not thinking about? In order not to think about it, you have to think about it. It has to move. And, of course, we call that process thinking, and it really isn't, but that's another story, another point. So conscious and subconscious are continuously changing places. What's the front door of your house look like? A moment ago, that was subconscious information. Now it's conscious because there's been energy, amplitude added to it by the resonance from my voice. What's your favorite item of clothing? What's your favorite piece of music? So all that information is stored in your subconscious mind, and when something resonates it comes to conscious awareness. So conscious, subconscious are always trading places. Now, if I said to you, you came to do this work for a particular reason, there's something you need to deal with in your life, what is it? Now, what I just did for most people is asked a question about something that is in their unconscious, something they've chosen not to look at. That's why we look for tools, to open up that unconscious dynamic. Now, if you just observe yourself, you notice when I ask the question, what is it that you came here to really work on? What's the underlying issue that you've not been dealing with or that you're looking to deal with in your life? Notice what happened with your breath. And most people, when I ask that question, shut the breath down. Shutting the breath down creates a barrier. In the ancient teachings, it was called the veil of the temple. You got to tear that puppy in two in order to access what's underneath the surface. So it's an artificial barrier. And what happens in the ancient teachings, it was called the heart. And you remember they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. That's where the power lies. At this stage in our development, because we each tend to have a giant database of unconscious information, that's where the highest levels of energy are stored. And so the ancients said, take care of that unconscious or the heart, because that's where the power is and that's where the issues come from in your life. Now, the reason why I pointed out you were holding your breath when I asked what's the issue that you came here to resolve that you've not looked at yet is because there's an automatic unconscious need to shut that information down. And it's done with the breath, invariably. When people are holding their breath, and you watch somebody in pain and trauma, and they're in that state of holding their breath almost continuously, or subventilating most of their lives, rarely ever really fully breathing. And so in the StillPoint breathing session, what happens is, it's a method of breathing I developed over 40 years ago that opens that veil fully so that whatever you've been hiding from yourself, whatever's been going on in your unconscious, pardon me, and often manifests physically or expresses physically, is uncovered when you use the breath properly. It begins to open the barrier so that you eradicate this unconscious condition, and the information that a moment ago was unconscious, like what's the big challenge of your life that most people hold their breath for when they think about it, as the breath moves, those things start to become available. And it's a practice. It's a new habit. Oftentimes people are like, well, I got $5 in 5 minutes. Tell me everything you know. Well, no, you're going to have to hang around a little longer than that. We don't change a whole lifetime and generation upon generation upon generation of unconscious dynamics in a minute. It doesn't happen. It's a process. If you go to the ancient stories, that story of the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years was not about a group of people lost in a hot 35 square mile sandy place for 40 years. Again, another code word for the unconscious is the desert. Most people live in the desert most of their lives. And remember, the alternative to the desert was the promised land. This isn't about mystical stuff. This isn't about theology. It's just you either get to live as a conscious co-creator of your life, the promised land, that's what you were offered, but the day you went into denial and you said, I don't want to be responsible for this, somebody came into your life and said, okay, I'll take control, I'll run your life, I'll control you, I'll manipulate you, I'll steal from you, I'll beat you up. And we went into that desert condition. And you remember what they said had happened to come out of the desert. They said the old generation had to die off. That didn't mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the causes held in the mind from the generations, when we walk through life and don't resolve those issues, are resonated by life. We draw circumstances in to resonate those situations, and then those situations in turn resonate that unconscious dynamic, and here we are back dealing with that same old issue that was never resolved by mom or dad or grandparents or great-grandparents, and it goes on generation after generation after generation. So if you just take note of when you're holding your breath, and then purposely, consciously take a breath and pay attention to your thoughts, you'll start to touch into the unconscious dynamics. When you go into a full-blown breathing session, you start to access those things that you and your bloodline have probably been hiding from yourselves all your life and for many generations before you ever arrived on the scene. And so that's the objective of this process and of this work. And so, we do the third Saturday and Sunday of each month, we have a MindShifters and StillPoint Breathing Club. If you want to really open a new level of your practice, if you're doing worksheets, if you're working these tools, but you haven't done the StillPoint process yet, then you might want to tap into that workshop series. There are several ways to participate. There's a one, you go, I don't know anything about this, but I'll try it once. Okay, so you can register for just one Saturday and Sunday session. We start at 11 o'clock Eastern time on both Saturday and Sunday. There are a couple of videos that come with registration, and so you can register just for the one. And then if you decide that this works, I want more of this, and it's really a sweet group of people that's developed around it, people who are really there for each other and developing another level of community with this work. And so if you do 1 month and you decide, well, I want to go to the 3-month program, the cost of doing a month is $150. The cost of the 3-month program is $125 per month for 3 months. So it drops the price off. Or you can do a year, and you can do the whole 12 sessions a year for $900. So it's discounted significantly more. And if you decide to do one and you go, this isn't for me, then you've done one and that's it. If you do 3, then you decide, well, I want to do the year. We'll prorate it so that each month is at the lowest rate of whatever you register for. It includes, if you register for the year, the ever-expanding MindShifter list. And that's another tool. You'll receive a video on using that. Actually, 2 videos will be included. There's one on MindShifters and Introduction to StillPoint Breathing, and then there's a StillPoint Breathing session, or pardon me, a MindShifter session, so that you can start to work with the MindShifters. So if you're interested in doing that, and as I say, Jeanie does one-on-one work, and I'm available now to do a private session if you're interested in doing any of that work on a one-on-one basis. So that's what's on my mind this morning after having just gone through a really awesome session with this gentleman who was just ready to do some work, and actually a person who's quite knowledgeable in the arena of the mind, and was just, pardon the pun, blown away by what he uncovered and what happened in the session. So pretty powerful stuff, pretty sweet. So that's what's on my mind at this moment. And if anybody's got any questions or thoughts, if you're on a station where we can't see you in our control panel, our call-in number is 999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show directly. And then if you push 1, that will raise a hand in the control panel, and we'll be having a conversation. So what's on your mind? How can we support you? 563-999-3581. Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
Nobody has a hand up. Audrey had just sent me a text and asked how she could listen to it on the computer or her iPad or whatever. And for those who maybe don't know, the easiest way is to go to the archives, which you click on the microphone in the middle of the page when you go to whyagain.org. And then over on the right-hand side are the radio shows listed. I'm clicking as I go, so that I'm telling you the directions. Over on the right-hand side are the archives. You click on 2023, go down to July, and then go down to whatever date you're wanting to listen to, even if it's live, if it's today. And when you get to that date, you click listen. Of course, you can't download until after the show's over, but you can click the listen button, and it will redirect you to the Blog Talk site, and it'll show that, you know, it's a current live call-in show and has the date, and you can hit the play button and listen to it that way. So I sent her those directions. But for those of you who
and they can go into the chat room.
Right, but then she would have to sign in, and I figured she probably hasn't signed in to Blog Talk, and this would get her on there quicker. So, but yes, you can sign in to Blog Talk, and then when you sign on to the website, or click on the microphone and click on listen, then it'll pop up the Blog Talk chat room, and you can ask questions there, and it'll pop up, and I can read them. And we do have a hand up now.
Awesome. Let's say hello to our caller.
I believe this is Miss Julie, and she was with us at the breath workshop last week, and she has joined us on the codependence workshop. Welcome, Julia.
Sweet. How are you, young lady?
I'm well, thank you.
How goes your process? We're rocking, doing well.
Process, yeah, good. As always, you are. I wanted to confirm that the next StillPoint was going to be the 19th of August this month?
Yes, it will always be the third Saturday and Sunday of the month, yeah. Unless something happens, it gets changed, but there'll be notice for that in advance if it happens.
Okay. And Jeanie, would you please send me instructions on how to get to the Blog Talk Radio other than calling in? And I would, and I don't know if this is the right time and place, but I would like some help with the worksheet.
Yeah, this is the place. That's what we're here for.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So this worksheet I started out is about, I'll just start at 1A. I, Julia, who am love, I'm experiencing, identify your emotions. And so this is not an emotion, this is a physical sensation that I'm having. And so
are there emotions around, but are there emotions around the physical sensations?
Yes, but
are you sad? Are you afraid?
B, I put pain. Right, I'm experiencing physical pain, and so when I experience physical pain,
slow down. Hold on. Let's back up just a little bit. So what you want to do with this first blank in B is identify your emotion, not your physical sensation. That'll come later in what the object of the attention is of the worksheet, and that would be your physical pain. But here you want to identify what kind of emotional response there is to that. So is there an emotion engaged with this pain? You know, the kinds of things that would be typical would be, I'm afraid, I'm sad. Are there emotions involved?
Well, yeah, almost like, I have the emotional wheel, and, it seems like to be in half of it are the good feelings. The other half are like discouraged, embarrassed, overwhelmed, helpless, rejected, and then I kind of categorize that color as fear, and that's kind of an orange, and then in red there's distant, sarcastic, frustrated, jealous, irritated, skeptical. Those I thought of as like anger, and anger's there too, and hurt. And then in this kind of magenta one, there's remorseful, stupid, inferior, isolated, apathetic, sleepy. I don't know, I didn't have like one word I could do for that little section, but it's pretty much like those, I can pick things out of all of those, you know. Okay. I feel depressed, I feel frustrated, and I feel overwhelmed and helpless and and ashamed, and
so,
you know.
Okay, let's back up a little. All right, let's back up a little bit and look at a little more about how the mind generates perception. So, in order for me to experience, let's say, having a physical body with physical pain, or at least that's what I call it. If we listen to Einstein, we start to understand that's not true. You know, Einstein says this: on such things as matter, we've been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy, energy whose vibration has been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. So the truth is, you don't have a physical body. However, the energetic dynamics in your mind convert your thinking into, 1, emotions, and 2, pictures. So we see the structures physically that we create with our minds. And when we're engaging in an energy that is of a disintegrative nature relative to our physiology, then we're impacting our physiology with that particular energy or pattern, that frequency. Now, you'll notice where it asks about the emotions, it then says, do a separate worksheet for each emotion. When you get down to number 1D, you'll notice that we're going to ask you to look at what's the thought you have to think to produce this emotion. And then you'll notice there it also says, do a separate worksheet for each thought. So my offering here would be to just let yourself become aware that there's a whole complex of thoughts that you've assembled that are energies that don't support you being fully alive in your physiology. You just named several of them, the emotional aspect of several of them. So for this worksheet, what I'm going to suggest that you do is pick one of them, the one that seems to be most in your face of all of those that you just mentioned. And then, so we'll go ahead and go through the whole process and then start to do worksheets on each of those emotions, identifying the thoughts. And what you'll be doing is you'll be touching into the mind energy with which you impinge on tissue with energies that don't support aliveness. In other words, create pain. And one by one, as you access those things and remove them, that is, forgive, there'll come a point where that whole pain complex is just going to fall apart. It's going to disappear. Does that make sense as kind of a starting point here?
Yeah,
or a
totally.
Next step?
I love it. Yeah, that's perfect.
So what you're going to do with each worksheet around this particular experience of pain is one by one. You know, if we go to the opening words in the book of John, in Aramaic, where we're told by the Greeks, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. It doesn't say that at all in Aramaic. What it says is, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. So what we're ultimately doing is we're looking to, you know, if we're in pain, physiology is saying, there's an energy in here that doesn't belong here, and I'm going to keep shouting, yeah, ouch, until I get your attention, and you remove it. And so each of those emotions, when you identify the thought behind it, and then you look at the goal involved, and we'll unfold this as we go, you'll undo those thought patterns that your body is, or your structure is warning you about. And once you undo a critical mass of those things, the whole pain complex will simply collapse. The disturbance in tissue will tend to simply disappear. And when it disappears, the tissue will tend to go back to its normal state of health and aliveness.
That's
so you're
really
going to
awesome.
do
I'm
piece
so
by
excited.
piece. It is exciting.
Okay, can I tell
I'm
you
with
what
you.
I put in B?
Please, yes.
Okay, so in B I put helpless. That's
Okay.
like the first
That's
emotion.
a good one to work with.
That I chose. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm feeling helpless, and then I drew this little scribble that
right.
Really
and that's a
my
good
helplessness.
One of the things, especially with things like helplessness, as small kids, you don't have much power over what happens to that little body, when somebody's changing a diaper or, whatever's going on. You don't have much power, and so helplessness can be a really profound experience. And actually the helplessness itself is actually more of a thought, I'm helpless, and when I think I'm helpless, how do I feel? Oh, scared.
Yeah, and I just thought about when I was a child and my parents divorced, when I was 5, and I felt so helpless and afraid.
Okay, breathing with you. Breathing. That's the key to opening this stuff and letting it go. Nice.
And then I have a question about, it says after B, it says my denial, and then there's a blank space. It's in parentheses. I don't know what to do there. My denial. Place. What do I do with that space?
So you've filled in number 1A and number 1B.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest that you tap into helpless actually is a thought, not really feeling. So helpless would be that you've kind of prematurely tapped into the thought. Helpless would actually be your answer in number 1D.
1D and 1D. So there it says, okay, so we're kind of jumping ahead here.
You're gonna, your mind has already jumped ahead, so we'll honor that, and just put your answer helpless in number 1D. And then let's go back and identify. Go back and identify what the actual thought is.
Well, I don't see a blank space. Where I see D, it says the truth is 1B, and in parentheses.
Right.
So mine says the truth is only my thoughts cause my emotion or upset. Breathe.
Right.
So thoughts, separate worksheet. I used to cause my emotion. It says 1B. Okay, so we're going to identify that. Okay,
so
I'll erase that.
So my thought is I'm helpless.
Is helpless. Okay.
I'm helpless.
Okay. Yeah.
Now,
helpless.
when you tap in, go back to that experience with mom. Mom and dad divorcing. It sounds like the emotion when you're experiencing the thought of helplessness is grief, sadness.
Grief.
Is that?
And pain.
Yeah. Okay. So these are energetic patterns, and here you are at 20 years of age. You've been carrying this around for quite a while.
No, 60. So for 55 years.
I was being facetious. I was just being nice.
Okay.
I don't want to call you on that. So notice that's an energy you've been carrying around for a long time until the point where it's creating physical pain.
Yeah.
And it's like it's time to resolve this. So then so now you've kind of backed in partway here. You've identified the thought, and now the emotion is sadness, grief, perhaps loss. There are a number that are going to tie into this, and each one will be a separate worksheet, because what we're going to start doing is plucking these thoughts out one by one, forgiving them, accessing and removing them by bringing them to the presence of love, until that complex of energy is so weakened that the whole experience just falls apart.
Yeah.
And that's what forgiveness is designed to do, to dissolve those things.
So how do I identify, like the first thing I chose was helpless. How do I identify, but it's really grief, and so, how do I identify?
No, it's both.
B?
It's both. If I hold up a coin, and I say, look at this coin, and I show you what we call the head, you'll say, well, there's George Washington. And then I show you the tail, and you say, well, there's an eagle. Now, is there a head and a tail? Is there a difference between the head and the tail? Or are they just aspects of one thing? That coin, like, at what point could you take the head away from the coin and just leave the tail? You can't do it. They're just opposite perspectives on the same thing. My offering is that your emotion and your thought are opposite perspectives on the same thing. They're not separate. And the cause level of the emotion is just a warning signal. Your system's saying, would you stop thinking this? This hurts. This doesn't belong in here. This is destroying us. Forgive this. Remove this thought. And when you do, the corresponding emotional response will disappear. When if you listen to that phrase in the Aramaic, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. Literally, what they're showing in the cell biologist laboratory today is when you think a thought, that thought becomes an actual molecule, a neuropeptide within your structure. That neuropeptide circulates around in your structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches. It lands on the cell, and as it lands on the cell, my take is it generates the emotion. The warning signal, hey, you're putting this energy into our creative process, into our structure. Here's the quality it is. You really don't want this. But, of course, we're not taught that in this culture. We're taught, oh, well, you're just feeling. Go ahead and be with your feelings and follow your feelings and all that stuff. And the truth is, it's just your cells warning you that this doesn't belong. And the correction lies in changing your thought disorders and removing the energy behind your thought disorders. Does that fit and make sense?
Yeah, so when you're having the feeling, that's like the feeling is your navigational system of that negative feeling is a trigger, an alert.
It's a warning.
An alert. Hey,
it's an alert. That's exactly when the neuropeptide lands on the receptor site in the cell, it warns you of the quality of that particular thought. And so when sadness, fear, rage, guilt, grief, etc., show up, your system's saying, review your thinking and change the game. This is not healthy.
And that's where I could, and if I don't have time or develop the mental muscles to, I printed out this short version, the reality management, and it's better, right? Where, it'll be before I have a lot of clearing.
There's some work to be done.
You're naturally, I guess I understand that, and that's what creates the dis-ease, because when you allow that thought to land without questioning it.
Correct. Right? When you put a disintegrative energy, this, again, if we listen to Einstein, on such things as matter, we've been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. Matter doesn't exist. What we call a body is actually a picture in the mind. If you were looking at me, or I were looking at you, and we could raise the rate of vibration in which our eye receives information, what our brain would show us would not be a body, but would show us this whirring mass of electrons, protons, neutrons, and light. We'd see what was actually there. Now, relative to that energy system, there are two qualities of energy. There's integrative energy, that's which will build it up and support it, and there's disintegrative energy. When you put integrative thought energy, mind energy, into your structure, when that neuropeptide hits the cell goes, yippee, hey, this is great, we're on track, this is our creative process, and we're rocking here. When I put in hate, fear, rage, guilt, grief, sadness, powerlessness, those kinds of thought disorders, then my cells say, ouch, ooh, no, If I don't pay attention to those warning signals, and I keep going on for a few decades with that type of thinking, my cells start to fall apart because the energy that I've put into them is of a disintegrative nature. Interestingly enough, in the ancient Aramaic language, and it's stored, yeah, literally what they're showing in the cell biologist laboratory, when that neuropeptide lands on the receptor site in the cell, if you were inside the cell watching it, what you would see would be what we call chemistry, the frequency we've identified as chemistry. We'd see chemistry arriving in the cell. And if the chemistry of it is of a disintegrative nature, the cell is moving toward a disease condition. If we apply forgiveness and access, what forgiveness is really about is developing the skill and the ability to literally reach into your energetic structure, into the cell, pull out those old neuropeptides based in hostility and fear, like the ones that started to move as you started to share what was going on for you. And to breathe and to be able to access those energetic patterns in the presence of conscious, active, present love. And when that happens, the disintegrative nature of those thought disorders are dissolved. And the cell is liberated from that quote-unquote chemistry. Literally, the chemistry will change in an instant.
Even though you have all these trillions of cells that are living, like they say how, like the cells, they're always dying, but, and you're getting new cells and old, like all the time, even though those cells are being replaced all the time, they share the memory.
Well, what are they being replaced from? So we have a set of instructions inside the cell. When that cell is weakened enough because there are energetic patterns in it that don't belong, it begins to die. The cell, which has been impacted by the cause of the cell death in the first place, the genetics that hold the instructions, have been compromised, and the next generation of cells are going to come out weaker. And the next generation of cells, if we continue on the disintegrative path, are going to come out weaker until we die. And as I started to say earlier, in the Aramaic language, the word that describes this thing of disintegrative energy is the word sin. It's an archery term. When you fired at the target on the archery range and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper yelled sin. It just means you're off the mark. When you put an off-the-mark thought into a cell, you impact its state of existence on what we call a chemical level, what the eye would call a chemical level. And on a genetic level, you've impinged on the healthy genes with this disintegrative energy. And then you remember, in the end result, what they said is the wages of sin is death. The result is, and that's not a theological threat. That's not God threatening anybody. It's just saying, hey, here's how physiology works, folks. You keep doing enough hate and fear and grief and sadness and rage and pain and trauma, and you're going to die. You're going to kill yourself. And my offering is that aging and death are all self-induced nonsense, sin. We do it to ourselves. Our culture teaches it to us. Our family systems teach it to us. And a lot of times people are faithful to those thought disorders just because they feel like they have to maintain the good old family feeling. And what we're saying is, no, it's time to challenge all of that. We're not designed for death. It's a tradition, so everybody's doing it, but we're not designed for it. And so as you look at, each emotion you identified there, each thought that you identify, and do this forgiveness process around them, then you're literally accessing, pulling the neuropeptide back out of the cell, exposing it to the transmuting energy of love, which dissolves and removes it. And the cell heals. And the load is taken off of the genes, so the next generation of cells, each time you take a load off of the genetic structure in regard to a particular cell or grouping of cells, the next generation of cells come out stronger instead of weaker, healthier, more vital, more capable, more intelligent.
That's great.
It is. It's awesome.
Yeah. So awesome.
So which worksheet are you looking at?
I am looking at the Wake Up Sheet, Divine Change Your Life. On the left it says Reality Management.
Okay.
Then on the right it says Forgiveness. I think this is the 7-point. Yeah, the 7.1.
Yeah, the 7th step. Okay, good. All right. So then you've identified your emotions, and let's just, and again, use a separate worksheet for each emotion. You just uncovered a bunch of things to work on. So hostility and fear are from internal corrupt data and indicate my use of sustained incoherence. And sustained incoherence was actually a term that was coined by a physicist named David Bohm. And what David Bohm is actually, he was a cohort with, or worked with Einstein, and he actually did some of the math that enabled him to build the atomic bomb. And he also studied in the realm of spirituality and psychology. And what he said, his bottom line conclusion, and this is close to a quote, though it's not exact, I don't have his exact quote memorized, but basically his take was that humans engage in self-destructive thoughts and patterns and deny ownership of those patterns, refuse to acknowledge that it's those patterns that are the problem, and they keep doing it without admitting what they're doing to themselves. And he called that sustained incoherence. So recognizing if that's what I'm doing, then I'm engaging in sustained incoherence to build this disturbing internal construct. It's my denial that causes my carbon-based memory to displace my experience of myself as my essence, love, and tells me the lie that my emotions are caused by somebody else. Does that make sense up to that point?
Yeah, so my denial, and then there's parentheses and a blank space.
There must be something. My denial causes my... Is that what yours reads?
Well, it says after B, I put grief, and then it also has more, empty space, and then in parentheses it says place each emotion on a separate worksheet, and then right after that it says my denial, and then there's parentheses and a small space.
Okay, I think you're using a different...
of myself.
Okay, I think maybe the printout of the sheet that you're looking at has bumped a space, because in there where it says my denial causes my, in quotes, it's actually supposed to be CBM, carbon-based memory. So maybe it's bumped that over so that it's gone behind that box, and that's why it looks like there's supposed to be a blank there. So if you just put those initials in there, my denial causes my CBM to displace myself as my essence love. Right. And carbon-based memory.
By my trigger. Okay.
Right. So now I'm living in the lie that something outside of me, and in this case, my body is the problem. I've got pain. So we want to correct that thinking. But before we go there, are you familiar with what the initials CBM mean? Carbon-based memory. You come across that?
Carbon-based memory. I think that's what you were kind of telling me about, but I'm familiar, but I couldn't tell you. I couldn't repeat.
Okay. So just so it goes in a little deeper. So if you were to walk into a chemist shop and say, hey, I want you to do an analysis of my body and tell me what chemicals are here. Tell me what it's made of. What's the atomic structure of my body? As they broke it down, what they tell you is the base element in your structure is carbon. We're carbon-based beings, our physiology anyway, on the level where we think of things as physical. And if you look at a carbon molecule, in that molecule there are 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons. You might recognize that number 666. That's where we store these disintegrative energies, is literally in the molecular structure of our bodies. That's why our errant thinking creates what we call physical disease. So recognizing, I want to really look at, so this internal construct is a product of what's firing out of this database that I have stored in my physiology. And I lose the experience of myself as love. And then, if we're in denial, the mind tells us that whoever is the trigger, whatever we're focused on. So then my story, my reality is that. Now, in this case, the object of your attention, the fact that you're working on your own structure, would be my body. So number 1C, you'd fill in with the words my body. And if you were to just sort of sum up everything that we've done so far in step 1, and you were to say, my body is doing what would your story be? You with me? Hello? Did we lose you? Are you still with us, Julia? Jeanie?
Yeah, can you?
Oh, there you go. You're back. You disappeared. Had you pushed your mute button?
I'm back.
Okay, good.
No, it's like all of a sudden you just started cutting out, and so right after you explained to me that we are carbon and we have these six molecules, and that the disintegrative energy stores in these cells.
Okay.
So then it got cut off.
Oh, okay. Well, then let's go back to. So then now, so my story, my reality is that 1C, and 1C would be the object of your attention. That's your body. Or it might be, refine it, it might be your pain. But you've got a story about it. So how would you fill that in? My body is just hurting and I don't know why, or I'm in pain and this pain is, destroying my life, cancel the thought. But whatever the story is, that's where you want to make note of it. Whatever the bottom line is, what would that be for you?
Yeah. My perception story is that I'm in physical pain, and it's very limiting. It limits me from what I can do, and it's
okay. What's happening with your breath right now?
Sucks.
Yeah, what's happening with your breath right
I wasn't breathing.
Yeah. So notice.
Getting pissed off.
Yeah. So notice when we touch into something like that, the first thing that happens is shut down the breath because I don't want to look at this and I don't want to feel it. So you'll notice at the end of the sentence, there's a reminder to breathe. And each time in the worksheet, there are places where people tend to hold their breath, and you really want to pay attention to your breath and breathe there.
Yes, that's at line D. Right after I've written my story, then the truth is my thoughts cause my emotional upset.
Right.
And breathe.
And once again, breathe.
Yeah.
And so what's the thought? And as it says, you might use a separate wake-up sheet for each thought. I use to cause my emotion. So in this case, we covered that already. The emotion was grief, and the thought is, I'm helpless. And then number 1E, I want to punish.
1C, oh yeah. Okay, I want to punish, okay.
So is there a punishment thought toward your body?
A punishment thought, well, there's like actions. I think I eat. I'll eat sugar.
Okay.
I'll eat things. I'll overeat to release. Okay. I think, to ease the pain.
Okay. So then you're engaging in an addiction that is anesthetizing you. So you're punishing yourself by eating, anesthetizing you. Punishing your body by eating, 1C, that's the object here where the pain is, and then punishing self by engaging in an addiction. And then you'll see at the end of that 1E, there's a little hand that points toward the contents of the box. And this is a place, and at first for a lot of people, this one's like, this is kind of silly. But in fact, the way that we've, in our lives and throughout our generations, have acquired the reality structures that we acquired, most of it's happened through the use of words and thoughts. And so much of, if you listen to Yeshua, he says the power of life and death is in our words. When people go around and say, oh man, that just kills me. Oh, I can't stomach that. I can't stand that. Well, people are really assaulting their stomachs, their legs, when they engage in language like that. So when you realize that a lot of that was structured in through language and speaking, learning to do verbal release to direct energy out of the structure is a very powerful thing to do. So that little box is about looking through each step in number 1 and releasing that up, surrendering that up to love. So I release and surrender myself. So number 1A is me, myself. So I release and surrender Julia to love. I release and surrender my emotion, my grief to love. I release and surrender my pain to love. I release and surrender my story, that, to love. I release and surrender my thought and my punishment. So you want to go through those steps, and as you practice with that, you'll find that the verbal release becomes more and more powerful in your life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. At the end of line 2 in section 1, at the end of line 2, I'm willing to process the disease as I go through the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of healing. Then there's a...
Oh, wait a minute. Whoa. You're way ahead of me. You just went on and ignored everything I just said. So what I'm going to ask you to do is deal with what's in the box. I want you to go through the verbal release and surrender of each thing that you identified in number 1 to love. Before you go on to the next step, you want to do that
Okay.
And start to get into the habit of verbalizing that release. So you can do that silently, you can do it out loud, whatever works for you. And
okay.
The show is getting to its time limit. It's going to cut us off automatically. We don't have any control over that within less than a minute.
Yeah.
So my thought is that if it works for you, let's finish this step, and then tomorrow let's just start right in on step 2, and we'll go right through the whole worksheet.
Okay, how about Monday?
Monday,
pardon me.
not tomorrow.
Today's Friday. It would have to be Monday. I just realized today's Friday, yeah. But we'll continue to go through the worksheet with you. So then I release and surrender myself.
I release and surrender myself.
To love.
Pisces and denial. My emotions are caused by my trigger. So that's D. The truth is, only my thoughts cause my emotional upset. Okay. I think.
So I'm surrendering. I'm going to do a verbal release. I release and surrender myself, Michael, to love. I release and surrender my grief to love. I release and surrender number 1C. I think we put in there pain, or it was the body, my body to love. I release and surrender my story that. So each step you surrender to that presence of love. And then on Monday, if you've got the space, let's just get together and let's carry on with this worksheet.
Okay,
in the meantime,
thank you so much.
In the meantime, on the website, there are at least 20 different radio shows under Radio Show Archives, at least 20 different radio shows where we've walked somebody through the whole forgiveness process. And so if you want to access that and do some work over the weekend with that, you'll probably come to this session on Monday with a different level of understanding, and we'll be able to take it all to a whole different level, higher level.
Okay. All right, awesome. I will do that. I will.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right, blessings.
Okay, have a great weekend.
All right.
Blessings.
Hey, you too. Blessings. Thanks for the good participating. Bye-bye.